हे एवरीवन, अगर आप अपना इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमिक्स का सिलेबस देखकर थोड़ा सा डर रहे हैं कि ये ट्रेड थ्योरीज, एक्सचेंज रेट्स और बीओपी कैसे कवर होगा, तो टेंशन मत लीजिए। मैंने आपका काम आसान कर दिया है। मैंने आपके सिलेबस के हिसाब से 100 मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चंस और आंसर्स की एक लिस्ट तैयार की है। इसमें हम एडम स्मिथ और रिकार्डो की क्लासिकल थ्योरीज से लेकर इमिसराइजिंग ग्रोथ और प्रेबिट सिंगर मॉडल जैसे मॉडर्न कॉन्सेप्ट्स तक सब कुछ कवर करेंगे। चाहे आपका वाइवा हो, मिड टर्म एग्जाम्स हो या बस आपको एफडीआई और रीजनल ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट्स का रिवीजन करना हो, ये क्वेश्चंस आपको कॉन्सेप्ट्स को क्लियर और कॉन्फिडेंटली समझने में हेल्प करेंगे। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं। 1. Basis and theories of international trade. What is the fundamental basis of international trade? International trade is based on the diversity of natural resources, differences in cost of production, and specialization between nations. Who is the father of absolute advantage theory? Adam Smith. Define absolute advantage. A country has an absolute advantage if it can produce a good more efficiently than another country. What is David Ricardo's main contribution to trade theory? The theory of comparative advantage, which suggests trade is beneficial even if one country is better at producing everything as long as relative efficiencies differ. What is comparative advantage? It is the ability of an economy to produce a particular good or service at a lower opportunity cost than its trading partners. What is the labor theory of value in classical trade models? It assumes that the value or price of a commodity is determined solely by the amount of labor required to produce it. Define reciprocal demand. Coined by J.S. Mill, it refers to the intensity of one country's demand for another product in exchange for its own. What is the equation of international demand? It is J.S. Mill's principle that the actual exchange ratio, that is TOT, terms of trade, is determined where the quantities demanded by both countries are equal. What is an offer curve? Developed by Marshall and Edgeworth, it shows the various quantities of an exportable commodity a country is willing to exchange for various quantities of an importable commodity. What is Haberler's opportunity cost theory? It states that the cost of a commodity is the amount of the second commodity that must be given up to release just enough resources to produce one additional unit of the first commodity. Is Haberler's theory considered superior to Ricardo's? Because it discards the unrealistic labor theory of value and accounts for increasing and diminishing returns. What is the Heckscher-Ohlin theory? The Heckscher-Ohlin theory states that a country will export goods that use its abundant factor intensively and import goods that use its scarce factor intensively. What are the two definitions of factor abundance in Heckscher-Ohlin theory? The physical criterion, ratio of total physical amounts of factors, and the price criterion, relative prices of factor prices. What was Heckscher's critique of classical theory? He argued classical theory ignored the role of factor endowments, land, labor, capital, and focused only on labor productivity. What is Leontief paradox? An empirical finding by Vasily Leontief that the US, a capital abundant country, exported labor intensive goods and imported capital intensive goods, contradicting the HO theory or Heckscher-Ohlin theory. Define internal economies of scale. Cost savings that occur within a firm as it expands its scale of production regardless of the industry size. Define external economies of scale. Cost savings that occur to all firms in an industry as the industry grows in size. What is vent for surplus? A theory by Adam Smith suggesting trade allows a country to use its idle land and labor to produce a surplus for export. What is the production possibility curve? A curve showing the maximum possible output combinations of two goods an economy can produce given fixed resources and technology. What determines the slope of an offer curve? The elasticity of demand for its imports and the supply of exports. 2. Define terms of trade. The ratio of a country's exports prices to its import prices. What are net barter terms of trade? The ratio between the price index of exports and index of imports. What are gross barter terms of trade? The ratio of the physical quantity of imports to the physical quantity of exports. Define income terms of trade. It measures the capacity of import based on export earnings. What is Prebisch-Singer hypothesis? The argument that the terms of trade for primary commodity exporters in developing nations tend to decline over time relative to manufactured goods exporters, that is, developed nations. What is emissarizing growth? A concept by Jagdish Bhagwati where economic growth leads to such a massive deterioration in terms of trade that the country is worse off after growth than before. What are gains from trade? The increase in total welfare or consumption possibilities that a country enjoys as a result of engaging in international trade. Distinguish between static gains and dynamic gains. Static gains refer to better resource allocation. Dynamic gains refer to economic growth, technological transfer, and increased competition. What is balance of payments? A systematic record of all economic transactions between the residents of a country and the rest of the world during a specific period. What is the current account BOP? It records trade in goods, services, unilateral transfers, and investment income. What is the capital account in BOP? It records all international transactions that involve the transfer of ownership of assets, including FDI, FPI, and loans. What is the difference between BOP and BOT? Balance of trade only includes visible trade, that is goods, while BOP includes BOT plus services, transfers, and capital flows. Why is the BOP always balanced in an accounting sense? Because it uses the double entry bookkeeping system where every credit has a corresponding debit. What is autonomous transaction in BOP? Transactions undertaken for their own sake, example profit motive trade, independent of the BOP situation. What is accommodating transaction in BOP? Transactions undertaken by the government or central bank to cover up a gap in autonomous transactions, example using forex reserves. Define BOP surplus. When total autonomous receipts exceed total autonomous payments. Define BOP deficit when total autonomous payments exceed total autonomous receipts. Name three causes of BOP disequilibrium: cyclical fluctuations, structural changes, developmental expenditure, inflation. What is single factorial terms of trade? Net barter terms of trade adjusted for changes in the productivity of export sector. What is double factorial terms of trade? Adjust for productivity changes in both the domestic export sector and the foreign import producing sector. Exchange rates protection and BOP correction. What is an exchange rate? The price of one currency expressed in terms of another currency. Explain purchasing power parity theory. Proposed by Gustav Cassel, this suggests the exchange rate between two countries should equal to the ratio of the country's price levels. What is the absolute version of PPP? The exchange rate is exactly equal to the ratio of price levels. What is the balance of payments theory of exchange rates? It states that the exchange rate is determined by the supply and demand for foreign exchange, which depends on BOP transactions. Define fixed exchange rate. A system where the government or the central bank ties the official exchange rate to another country's currency or to gold. Define flexible or floating exchange rate. A system where the exchange rate is determined by the market forces of demand and supply without government intervention. What is a spot rate? The exchange rate for immediate delivery of currency, usually within 2 days. What is a forward rate? The exchange rate agreed upon today for a transaction that will occur at a specific future date. What is free trade? A policy where a government does not restrict imports or exports through tariffs, quotas, or other barriers. What is protectionism? A policy of protecting domestic industries from foreign competition by imposing trade barriers. Explain the infant industry argument. The idea that new industries in developing countries need temporary protection from established foreign competitors until they become efficient enough to compete. What is a tariff? A tariff is a tax or duty imposed by a government on imported or exported goods. Distinguish between ad valorem and specific tariffs. Ad valorem is a percentage of the value, specific is a fixed amount per physical unit. What is an import quota? A direct restriction on the quantity of a good that may be imported during a specific period. Define devaluation. A deliberate downward adjustment of a value of a country's currency relative to another currency or standard under fixed exchange rates. What is the Marshall-Lerner condition? Devaluation will improve the BOP only if the sum of price elasticities of demand for exports and imports is greater than 1. What is the J-curve effect? The observation that a country's trade balance initially worsens after devaluation before it eventually improves. What is exchange control? State intervention in the foreign exchange market to control the demand and supply of foreign currency. Mention two monetary measures to protect BOP deficit: monetary contraction, tight money policy, devaluation or depreciation. Mention two non-monetary measures to correct BOP deficit: import quotas, export promotion or subsidies. 4. Institutions, regional trade agreements and FDI. What does IMF stand for? International Monetary Fund. When was the IMF established? Following the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, it started operations in 1945. What is the primary objective of the IMF? To promote international monetary cooperation, exchange stability, and provide temporary financial assistance to correct BOP disequilibrium. What are SDRs? Special drawing rights, an international reserve asset created by the IMF, also known as paper gold. What does IBRD stand for? International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, commonly known as the World Bank. What is the main function of the World Bank? To provide long-term loans for reconstruction and development projects in member countries. What is the difference between IMF and World Bank? IMF focuses on short-term stability and BOP issues. World Bank focuses on long-term economic development and poverty reduction. What was GATT? General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, a multilateral agreement to reduce trade barriers. When was GATT replaced by WTO? January 1st, 1995. What is UNCTAD? United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. It focuses on trade, investment, and development issues of developing countries. What does RTA stand for? Regional Trade Agreement. What is ASEAN? Association of Southeast Asian Nations. What is SAARC? South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. Define foreign direct investment. An investment made by a firm or individual in one country into business interests located in another country, typically involving a lasting interest and control. Define foreign portfolio investment (FPI). Investment in financial assets, stocks or bonds in a foreign country without direct control over the management of the firm. What are the benefits of FDI for developing countries? Capital inflow, technology transfer, job creation, and improvement in infrastructure. What is a free trade area (FTA)? A group of countries that eliminate internal trade barriers but maintain their own independent external tariffs. What is a customs union and free trade agreement where members also adopt a common external tariff against non-members? What is common market? A customs union that also follows free movement of factors of production, labor and capital. Define economic union. A common market that also involves the harmonization of economic policies and often a common currency, example EU. What is trade diversion? when trade shifts from low-cost producer outside a trade bloc to a higher-cost producer inside the bloc due to regional preferences. What is trade creation? When trade shifts from a high-cost domestic producer to a lower-cost producer within a trade bloc. What is dumping? Selling a product in a foreign market at a lower price than its fair market value or production cost. What are anti-dumping duties? Tariffs imposed by an importing country to counteract the effects of dumping. Plain most favored nation status. A principle where a country must treat all its trading partners equally in terms of trade advantages. What are TRIPS agreement? Trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, an international legal agreement between all member nations of the WTO. What is TRIPS? Trade related investment measures, rules that apply to the domestic content requirements and trade balancing requirements of a country. Define hedging in the foreign exchange market. Taking an action to protect against a potential loss due to exchange rate fluctuations. Define arbitrage. Simultaneously buying and selling of a currency in different markets to profit from price differences. What is speculation? Buying and selling currencies with the expectation of making a profit from the changes in their value over time. What is managed floating? A system where exchange rates are mostly market determined, but the central bank intervenes occasionally to stabilize the currency. What are invisible items in BOP? Services like shipping, banking, tourism, and insurance. What is technical BOP disequilibrium? Short-term fluctuations caused by temporary factors like seasonal variations in exports. What is the stop-go policy? Alternating between expansionary and contractionary policies to manage growth and BOP stability. Define optimum tariff. A tariff rate that maximizes a country's welfare by improving its terms of trade more than it reduces the volume of trade. What is the Stolper-Samuelson theorem? It states that an increase in the relative price of a good will lead to an increase in the return to that factor which is used intensively in its production. What is the Rybczynski theorem? It states that at constant prices, an increase in the endowment of one factor will increase the output of the good intensive in that factor and decrease the output of the other good. What is transfer pricing? The price at which divisions of a multinational company transact with each other, often used to minimize tax liabilities. Name two members of SARC. The members of SARC are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, and Afghanistan. Why is international economics studied as a separate branch? Because of factor immobility between nations, separate national currencies, different socio-political environments, and distinct national policies. तो दोस्तों ये थे इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमिक्स के वो 100 क्वेश्चंस जो आपके वाइवा या एग्जाम्स में गेम चेंजर हो सकते हैं। हमने यूनिट 1 की क्लासिकल थ्योरी से लेकर यूनिट 4 के इंटरनेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशंस तक सब कुछ डिटेल में डिस्कस किया है। मुझे पूरा यकीन है कि अगर आप इन 100 सवालों को ढंग से समझ लेते हैं तो एग्जामिनर का कोई भी सवाल आपको कंफ्यूज नहीं कर पाएगा। याद रखिए, इकोनॉमिक्स सिर्फ ग्राफ और नंबर्स नहीं बल्कि लॉजिक का खेल है। अगर आपको ये वीडियो हेल्पफुल लगी और आप चाहते हैं कि मैं और भी पेपर्स के ऐसे टॉप क्वेश्चंस लेकर आऊँ तो क्विक कैपिटल को सब्सक्राइब ज़रूर करें और इस वीडियो को अपने फ्रेंड्स के साथ शेयर करें ताकि उनकी भी वाइवा प्रिपरेशन सॉलिड हो सके। नीचे कमेंट सेक्शन में बताइए कि अगला वीडियो आपको किस टॉपिक पर चाहिए। मिलते हैं अगले वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए कीप लर्निंग एंड स्टे इन्वेस्टेड इन योर एजुकेशन। थैंक यू सो मच फॉर वॉचिंग।